welcome to the future.
Okay, so I admit that whole intro was mostly baloney, only because I don't really use that many screens when I'm using the Vision Pro. However, it is true that you can put a bunch of screens around your home and walk around and they'll still be there. And yes, I actually did put one out in the sky and it was actually quite impressive. But the reason I did that was to quickly illustrate the power of spatial computing, since that's pretty much what Apple's tagline is for the Vision Pro. What's really interesting to me is that no matter how impressive the technology is, the general public's perception of the Vision Pro doesn't seem to be very favorable. I mean, it could be from the very high price or the dystopian memes that have been circling around the internet in the last week or so. After 7 days of owning this, I think I have an idea why. Now, before we begin, I want you to pay close attention to what I'm about to say. This video review is going to rely heavily on trust. And the reason I say that is because no matter how many words I use or how many screen recordings I share, I won't be able to fully convey the beauty of the Apple Vision Pro's interface. It's just stunning. So in the box, you get the Vision Pro, 2 headbands, 1 solo loop and 1 dual loop, more on this later, a battery that's slightly smaller and slightly heavier than my iPhone 15 Pro Max, a charger, a cleaning cloth, the magnetic light seal, an extra light seal cushion that's also slightly wider, and the front cover for the Vision Pro. Now, assembly is actually quite simple. Since it's very difficult to make a video review of something that I can hardly demonstrate, I spent almost the entire day last weekend demoing this product to family and friends. In total, I was able to get around 13 people to try it for at least 20 minutes each. And one of the things that people probably don't realize about the Apple Vision Pro is that it's a very personal device. It measures your face, it tracks your eyes and your hands in order to give you a more seamless experience when interacting with the virtual world. Now, there is a guest mode that you can enable, but all it does is really quickly scan their eyes and their hands, and they're on their own. So I had to basically walk them through the entire process of resizing things, moving things around, and you can imagine how much time that actually took. So the basic rule of using the Vision Pro is that your eyes are your cursor, meaning whatever you look at, that's what you're selecting. And when you pinch your fingers, you are interacting with that selection. The concept is very simple and the tech is actually quite amazing. There are cameras all over the Vision Pro that actually tracks your hands, so even if you have them resting comfortably on your lap, it can still register the pinching gesture. Eye tracking is very, very good as it makes you feel like your brain is actually connected to the computer because it knows exactly where you're looking at. The first few minutes feels like magic, as they would say, but give it a little bit more time and you'll realize how much concentration it actually takes for you to look at something and then select it. You see, when you exist in the real world, we're so used to seeing things in our periphery, which means that we can interact with them without looking at them directly. I can open a doorknob without looking at it directly. I can even move a chair without looking at it directly. All it takes is peripheral vision and muscle memory. When you're using the Vision Pro, it takes less than a second for you to look at something and then interact with it. But do that for a couple of minutes and it starts to really sink in that it does take a little bit more concentration than you thought. However, after I've acclimated to using the Vision Pro, it felt very natural. But you do experience a little bit of eye strain, and in my case, dry eyes, probably from the lack of blinking. Hand tracking is also very good, but it does feel weird in the beginning because you're not actually feeling any physical object and there's no haptic feedback. Based on my experiment last weekend, I've noticed that some people acclimate to the system much faster than others. Some can naturally just move things around with their eyes and hand gestures, and others struggle a little bit. And the interesting part is that age doesn't seem to be a real factor. Some of the much older users had no trouble using the controls, and some of the younger ones actually kind of struggled a little bit. However, regardless of any preconceived notions they had about the Vision Pro, all of them said that it looked stunning and it was nothing like they've ever experienced before. I remember when 4K TVs were first introduced in the market, I would be at my local Best Buy and we would joke around that even real life doesn't look this good. The Vision Pro kind of gives you the same feeling, but in the context of VR. I found myself saying something like, I didn't think that the virtual world would look this good. And the reason it looks good is because the Vision Pro uses micro OLED technology with 23 million pixels that render images in 4K at a 90 Hz refresh rate most of the time. The reason I say most of the time because according to Apple, depending on the content, the refresh rate can go as high as 100 Hz. Just to be clear, I don't think it looks as good as a real 4K screen, but it's pretty darn close. And just like the real world, when you move a screen away from you, it actually gets a little bit blurry or just less sharp. Interestingly, at a distance, even if you increase the size of the window, the text doesn't seem to be as sharp, which in a way I guess makes it realistic. But I think the real reason why it feels realistic is thanks to the Vision Pro's Passthrough Technology. Now, despite the large front glass of the Vision Pro, there's actually no way of physically looking through it thanks to all the hardware packed inside. Instead, it uses a bunch of cameras that act as your eyes to the real world. This is Passthrough, and it works like magic. Once you start up the Vision Pro, Passthrough gives you the sensation that you are wearing ski goggles that are a little blurry. There's zero latency that I could detect, so it really does feel like I'm looking through transparent goggles. The sensation is so realistic that not once have I ever doubted my surroundings. So it's perfectly normal for you to walk around your home, and in some cases, some people like to actually wear them out in public. But we'll get back to that in a bit. The biggest downside of Passthrough is that it doesn't look as good as you might be led to believe. The footage feels muddy, like looking through your phone's front-facing camera in low light. If you try to look at another screen using the Vision Pro, you will struggle to read what is actually on it. Sometimes it even does a weird thing where my phone feels like the screen is curved inwards for some weird reason. And if you're in an actual dark space, it's best to be careful when walking around while wearing the Vision Pro. I mean, I guess that's common sense. Speaking of dark spaces, the Vision Pro requires a certain amount of light for it to actually track your hands. So if you plan on using it in complete darkness, well, you're gonna have a lot of trouble. To move things around in the Vision Pro, you just simply have to look at the line right below the app or the window, and once highlighted, pinch your fingers and move it around in 3D space. To change the size, you look directly at either lower corners until this symbol appears. Then you can simply pull outwards or move inwards to manipulate the size. It feels very natural. Pinching your fingers together while looking at a page will let you swipe or scroll. You can place windows just about anywhere, floating in place, on a wall, on the ceiling, or even in the sky. The Vision Pro's spatial computing power makes it possible for them to stay pinned in place even if you're moving around in your home. One thing I try to explain to friends is that the graphics feel solid. There's no jittering or weird artifacts on the side, and they even cast shadows on surfaces. This helps trick your brain into believing that you're actually interacting with a physical object. Unfortunately, this fidelity is just really impossible to capture on video, so you're gonna have to try it out for yourself to completely understand what I mean. Environments in the Vision Pro is possibly one of the best things about it. It puts you in a virtual background that looks and feels incredible. I say feel because these are not simply photos. There is depth, there is movement, and there is sound in the environment, such as wind or water. The annoying part is that if I try to do a screen recording of it, it only looks about half as good as it does when experiencing it for yourself. One thing I really like doing is picking an environment, changing the time from day to night, pinning Apple Music to the side, and just kind of sit there, enjoying the music. Watching movies in an environment takes the experience to a whole new level. If you launch a show or movie, you can enable full screen mode or cinema mode. The Vision Pro will increase the size of the virtual screen and plop it at a distance that very much feels like sitting in a movie theater, except you're on top of a mountain or in the middle of a desert. What makes this experience truly feel realistic is that the light coming from the virtual screen bounces off surfaces in the environment, or in one particular case, reflects off of the water's surface. Honestly, screen recordings don't do the visuals any justice, as there is space, there is volume, and it just feels alive. Disney Plus even has a catalog of 3D movies that you can enjoy using the Vision Pro. But I think the new immersive shows from Apple TV really show what this machine is capable of. And if you're wondering about the speakers, yes, they are very good. They actually do an amazing job simulating spatial sound for movies. Music also sounds wonderful, so I've never really had the desire to connect my AirPods to the Vision Pro, unless of course I want complete immersion. If you have a Mac at home with macOS Sonoma 14 or older installed, you can mirror the screen to your Vision Pro. You can either click on the mirror button on the top right of your screen and choose the Vision Pro, or in my case, once I open up my MacBook, a button will float on top of the screen asking if I'd like to connect. It takes a few seconds for it to connect, but once it does, you have a massive virtual screen floating in front of you. You're able to move it around in space and resize it as well, which makes it super fun and actually super useful. I can have my main screen in front of me and have supporting screens anywhere else. I can have my Apple Music pinned to the wall and my email to the other side. And that's just one simple scenario where a Vision Pro is actually beneficial for someone who works from home, especially if you have limited space for a dedicated office. The other scenario is a little bit more specific for parents like me. You see, both my kids are under 8 years old, which means that after school, someone has to watch them. And I can't necessarily have them both in the home office. So what I do is I actually work in our dining area where they can play around me and watch TV. What's also pretty amazing is that the open design of the Vision Pro allows me to still listen to music or reference videos while keeping situational awareness for my kids. I think this is a great example of a practical use of mixed reality for people who work from home. Editing a Final Cut timeline is also very, very doable. It just feels like having a massive 4K screen right in front of you. As a photographer, editing photos in the Vision Pro is quite a pleasant experience. The image quality is crisp and color representation is just as accurate as my studio displays. I can bring the screen closer to me and see the fine details. The only caveat is that Adobe apps are not natively available on the Vision Pro yet, which means that I will have to rely on connecting my Vision Pro to my MacBook if I wanted to do any heavy work. So this brings me to a couple of things that the Vision Pro can and cannot do. Yes, once connected, you can absolutely use the MacBook's trackpad and keyboard to control the Vision Pro. Yes, thankfully you can connect a Bluetooth keyboard to the Vision Pro, which is miles better than the virtual keyboard. Honestly, don't even bother with that one. Interestingly, no, you cannot connect a Bluetooth mouse to the Vision Pro. You can, however, connect a Magic Trackpad, which is also made by Apple. Unfortunately, no, at least not yet. This is one of those features that I hope they add to the Vision Pro because this will make everything feel a lot more seamless between the different Apple devices. Believe it or not, yes. I was really surprised that I was able to send and receive text messages, not iMessages, but actual text messages using the Vision Pro, which really confused me. So I don't really have an answer as to why, but I'm here for it. Kind of. The weird thing is, if I try to ask Siri to make a call, it'll just say that I basically can't do that. FaceTime calls, though, they work. Kind of. I mean, pulling up individual apps in Windows using the Vision Pro is simple enough. However, what you probably don't know is if you connect a Mac to the Vision Pro, you're only allowed to open one Mac screen, which means every other floating window needs to be launched using the Vision Pro. So while eye tracking inputs don't work on the Mac screen itself, you can at least move it around in space and change the size. So in essence, you kind of feel like you're using two computers. I know that sounds terrible, but you can at least use the MacBook's trackpad to control all of the screens. Yes and no. I mean, technically you can if you're probably just sitting in a coffee shop or maybe even a parking lot. You see, I believe that the Vision Pro was not designed to be worn while on the go for two very good reasons. One, the Vision Pro doesn't really recognize any faces or objects or places, which means that it won't show you any relevant information about the real world. So the only things that you can actually do with the Vision Pro is use regular apps. And for the most part, they only work when you're stationary. And second, as I mentioned earlier, the pass-through really isn't that great. It's like walking around with very blurry goggles, and no one wants to do that, let alone drive with them. So all the people that you see on the internet walking around with their Vision Pros well, they're either experimenting or they're just trolling you. Now, this really depends on your comfort level and honestly just the shape of your face, because there's no escaping the fact that the Vision Pro is front heavy, and eye tracking can also become very tiresome after a while. And to me personally, the 2.5-hour battery life doesn't really matter because I'm usually just in one spot and I usually have it charged. The dual loop will definitely give you more support, but it's harder to actually set up and put on, and it will mess up your hair, that's for sure. The solo loop provides less support, but I find that the solo loop is actually more comfortable in a weird way. So the point is, you really have to try both for you to understand which one fits you best. Though it didn't happen a lot, I've noticed that sometimes the mouse cursor on my MacBook lags a little bit when connected to the Vision Pro. That could be through my Wi-Fi system at home. I'm not really sure, but I figured I'd put it in this video. So once connected to the MacBook, the trackpad works amazingly well on the Vision Pro. However, if you connect a Bluetooth keyboard to the Vision Pro and a Magic Trackpad also to the Vision Pro, you're going to be met with utter chaos because the Vision Pro doesn't seem to recognize what you're using to control objects. So the only way around this is you basically connect your peripherals to your Mac, and then the Mac is being mirrored to the Vision Pro. When connected to a Mac, the sound will come out of that machine and not through the Vision Pro. I know it's kind of weird. Essentially, if you want to watch something, you have to watch it through Vision OS for the sound to actually come out of its own speakers. Despite using the Vision Pro for a couple of hours, it doesn't really get hot and you never hear the fans kick in. The battery gets a little warm but never gets hot to the touch, which is very interesting. If eye and hand tracking feels a little bit wonky, you can usually just redo the setup and that should fix the issue. I usually like to trim videos I captured using the Vision Pro, but unfortunately Vision OS doesn't let you edit any of the clips. So you're gonna have to send it to your phone or your Mac, trim the clip, and then publish it on social media. And even just after a few minutes, the Vision Pro will leave a mark on your face. As impressive as the Vision Pro is, it's obviously not perfect. From my point of view, the only thing I would really like improved is the camera for the pass-through. Everything else can be hypothetically be improved through software updates. Because unless Apple fully commits to an AI-powered device that you can wear while you're on the go, I don't think a Gen 2 is coming anytime soon. In the context of working from home, while you can do a lot of things with the Vision Pro, I feel like you will have to change your workflow to adapt to its quirkiness. Except for specific scenarios, I can't really say that it has improved my productivity. Rather, it just enhanced my experience. I think it's super easy to hate the Apple Vision Pro until you try it out for yourself, because the experience is very hard to convey just using words and badly captured screen recordings. One user who was mightily impressed by it actually asked me, "So who is the Vision Pro for?" And my honest answer to that is, for someone who wants to experience the most refined mixed reality headset available today. Which brings me to what I think is the biggest downside of the Vision Pro, and that it's a very personal device. Because no matter how nice the experience is for you, you can't really share that moment with someone else unless they actually try it for themselves, and then they can't really share that moment with you, which is kind of weird. To put it in a different way, it's like visiting the Grand Canyon and then taking a photo of it so that you can show your family and friends. But then you're gonna have a really hard time trying to make them understand why you're so excited over this giant hole in the ground, because they weren't there to actually experience the grandeur and just being in that moment with you. And ironically, as magical as the experience of the Vision Pro is, once you take it off after using it for a while, you'll suddenly realize how beautiful the real world is. So everyone who's been telling me to just get a Quest 3, sure, I'll give it a go. But only after you've tried the Vision Pro and you are convinced that it's just as good. Thank you for watching this video. Would love your support by subscribing to this channel. And if you have follow-up questions regarding my Vision Pro experience, let me know down below in the comments. See you guys again soon.